Hey everyone, I'm Matt, and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. Last weekend, I had the pleasure of attending the first ever conference of the Soul Foundation held at Stanford University. The Soul Foundation is a think tank that brings together experts from academia and government to address the philosophical, policy, and scientific problems regarding the UAP-UFO phenomenon. Today, we have the Executive Director of the Board of the Soul Foundation, Dr. Garry P. Nolan, with us, but pathology at Stanford University School of Medicine. And if that's not enough, he is one of the world's leading advocates for UAP transparency. Please welcome Dr. Garry Nolan. Dr. Nolan, how are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you all?
Well, fantastic. So first, let's talk about the Soul Foundation. I had an absolutely fantastic time. So what is the Soul Foundation? How did it come about?
Well, it came about initially through an introduction that a mutual friend made between myself and Peter Skafish, a sociologist and anthropologist and philosopher. And we got to talking about the issue of, well, what's missing currently in the discussion. It isn't as if there aren't other professional organizations out there, some fantastic ones like ASA and SCU and UAPX and others that aren't approaching the problem from a professional standpoint, but nobody yet had addressed the professional academic market, if you will. The idea being that if you're an academic, when you write a paper, you generally have to reference other papers because those end up being sort of the foundation on which you're building sets of arguments. And you can't necessarily or easily reference an opinion piece somewhere or a Twitter thread. So and also you want the discussion to be around formulas, policy, the approaches, reasoned arguments, and all of those arguments need to be at some level what we call peer-reviewed. And the peer review, what it does is it gives it a level of credibility and standing on which you can build things. And so that began the discussion. And then we realized, well, gee, this could be actually a nexus through which other organizations might meet and bring to the table their ideas. And to start publishing papers on it. I mean, people think, oh, publishing papers, policy papers, how boring. It's actually how the world works. It's how policy gets done. It's, and then we realized that there was basically a need in research, in the government and the research facilities that the government sponsors for ideas and again, these are vetted ideas where, for instance, if you have somebody, a Senate staffer who wants to know something about an area, they will generally ask for an academic for a white paper. Well, there's no one place you can go to for UAP policy white papers where the ideas have already been collected, where that whatever this think tank is has the ability to reach out into many other locations in either the government, industry, or the military or the IC community with those kinds of connections. And so it just became obvious that this was what was necessary. And then the other thing that 2-3 years ago on Twitter, I've been on Twitter for quite a while, the arguments and the back and forth there were just so, I don't know, they were something between infuriating and saddening. Yeah. That is like, look, I tell people many times, you need to be professional. If you want to be accepted, we need a professionalization of this. And so basically this is me taking matters into my own hands along with Peter Skafish, my partner in this, and then also getting together with David Grush. I mean, that was the three of us then were the catalyst who became the key founders of the Soul Foundation. And so you have really three legs of the stool here. You have science, you have sociology, and then you have the government and IC and military perspective from David Grush, where we can, if there's a question to be asked, we have at least amongst the three of us the necessary and requisite expertise to know who else to ask if we don't know the answers immediately.
That totally makes sense. So I was only able to attend the second day of the conference, and I was there the entire Saturday, and was really taken aback by the seriousness of the presentations, things that I had never thought about in terms of what UAP disclosure will do in terms of social instability, possibly different sort of ramifications that really I had never thought of, and it really opened my eyes in many ways. There were so many great presentations. If you were to take all of them and distill them down into maybe the 5 or 6 points that really stood out to you, what would those be?
Well, the first is that many academics now are taking this seriously. It's no longer the kind of matter that you can just dismiss with a giggle and a laugh, and a snide assertion or aside to tinfoil hats. It's, as I've often said, it's about the data. And so what you now have are serious academics who've looked at this and said, oh, the data seems real. The number of other Stanford professors who were there in the audience was shocking even to me. People who I didn't know. I didn't know them. We made it open to the Stanford community. We had to make sure that we left open seats for Stanford professors and staff. And they came. And so, I think that's the first major takeaway. I think the second takeaway, and there were a number of talks, for instance, about religion and philosophy that I would leave it to. You should get Peter Skafish on at some point to summarize those, because he's quite eloquent on this matter. But I think the other issue is the government side. Saturday was government and policy with some religion at the end to wrap it up. Friday had been all about the science, pretty much, again with some religion mixed in. And so the takeaway was, we'll spend probably a good deal of this just talking about the amendment, was listening to Carl Nell go over the reasoning behind each of the issues in the UAP amendment as it was put forward originally, and the detailed policy that needed to be understood to understand why the language was the way it was. And so Carl spent, a good half an hour only, although he could have talked for probably an hour, going over this matter. And so to me, the takeaway was just reading the UAP language itself. There is clear evidence of some sort of a program that deals with material that doesn't seem to be from humans, and that there is overclassification of the data that prevents it from being released to the public. And moreover, it's not just, is there a secret or not? It's why isn't, and this is my axe to grind, why isn't the information being taken advantage of? I always have sort of characterized my career as being someone who is upset when there is potential unrealized. And so here you have a clear example of unrealized potential, where you've got materials and objects that are not being taken advantage of in terms of the science that could be done with them. You have knowledge of that we're probably not alone, that we're not alone. And I'm just state that. That's being kept from us, even though it's an open secret. So I don't know what they think they're hiding anymore.
I don't understand either.
We'll get to it, of course, but of course the UAP amendment looks like good portions of it will be stripped down by the Republican leadership. And I don't think it's a GOP problem. I think it's just that they were the ones who had the levers of power that the lobbyists used to basically bring the amendment to a screeching halt. But that anybody could look at this who's a skeptic and argue all they want about fuzzy videos, But now look at this and say, well, why would lobbyists for the major aerospace corporations bring major pressure to bear such that Mitch McConnell went to Schumer and said, it's over, it's out. And that you have, well, that's the word on the street.
Wow.
Right. And that's not by any secret knowledge. That's just the word on the street already. And that you have the head of the House Intelligence Community or group and the head of the Armed Services Republican side basically squash it. If it's something that doesn't exist, why do you spend so much time trying to make sure that people continue to think it doesn't exist?
Exactly.
Like I said in the SALT meeting, in Manhattan, that Alex Klokas had invited me to, when he asked me, what's the best evidence for whether or not there's UAP? Is like what your government is doing about it and how it's twisting itself into pretzels to find ways not to talk about it. I mean, it's done. I mean, the very fact that they came out against it so harshly is disclosure in and of itself. And I don't think that the people who are doing this realize that there's a lot of people out there like me who really don't like being told no.
Right. I'm one of them too.
When I have a problem that is I keep trying and I'm not getting the answer that I know is there, it's just going to stimulate me to try harder. So, all they've done is infuriate people. So it might not be now. And so, yes, they've put it off for a while, but it's not going to be forever.
Yeah, it just blows me away. I saw a tweet by 60 Minutes producer Graham Messick. I think he was replying to maybe David Grush's tweet or someone else regarding how this whole thing had been shut down. And his reply was why? So I replied to him and I said, Graham, you have just been handed on a silver platter your next 60 Minutes episode to investigate exactly who these assholes or however you want to put them shut down.
They have sown the field with a million questing vines.
Yeah. It's the stupidity just completely blows me away. And I have to say when I listened to Carl Nell speak, he did lay the very light foundation that this thing may not go through, which frankly I was very surprised. I had spoken to someone in the Senate a couple of weeks ago. Maybe closer to 4 weeks ago, and they were very confident that it was going to go through with very little in terms of changes. So I to be honest, I was caught flat-footed. So so with that being said, everyone I think feels very, I would say, dejected as far as this kind of falling apart. So. And thanks, of course, to Mike Rogers and Mike Turner and some other people that I think will come to light that the public isn't aware of. So, Dr. Nolan, should we be down? How far back does this push disclosure? Is this going to put the toothpaste back in the tube?
I mean, no. I mean, I'm not. I mean, there's a difference between disappointed and dejected. Right. So, first of all, it's been 80 years. Right. And the fact that we got it this far and where we got it, and I don't think the IC community and the people who have been trying to keep this secret are really quite aware of how social media operates these days, that they can't do anything in the shadows anymore that isn't recognized for what it is. And I just spoke about that. But I look at it like a paper I'm trying to get into a top journal, right? I mean, I can publish a paper on any given set of results anywhere, and I can get it through peer review, but the level of the journal is what determines your career potential. It gets you jobs at top universities, et cetera. So I always try to make sure that for my students and postdocs that we get articles in the right place, because if the idea is important, the status of the journal promulgates the idea further. And so when I get a rejection from reviewers that say, well, we didn't like this or we didn't like that, or something else, especially if I think it's ridiculous and fixable, I just get to work. I mean, it's like when my experiments didn't work when I was still a student or a postdoc in the lab, I didn't get mad at myself. I got mad at the experiment. You know, to the extent that it was my fault for not designing the experiment the right way. But it was like, I know it's right, so I'm just going to keep doing it. So it gets back to this idea that people need to take this, let's say, rejection and turn it into a motivation to figure out how that is they can continue to push it. And what's going to happen, and I don't think what the people behind the scenes realize is that the frustration that's boiling over, even from people inside, is just going to cause a form of disclosure that is uncontrolled. I mean, what Carl Nell had done, and Carl and I had a good conversation about this along with Dave at one point, and it was like, look, there's a lot of things that can go wrong if you let this kind of information out in the wrong way. Right. And so what Carl was attempting to do was prepare the instruments of power, prepare the instruments of government and society in a careful way to accept the information more readily, right? And so it was going to be, 8 to 10 years. Now, some people didn't like that. It's 8 to 10 years, or that's ridiculous. Or Jack Sarfati thinks that because he solved warp equations that he's the center of the universe. Well, I'm sorry, Jack, you're not. You're a giant narcissistic fool. Sorry for having to say that, but he's been all out on me.
Sounds like some debunkers I know. Anyway, sorry, go on ahead.
Well, it's just unnecessary. Yeah. It's so unnecessary and so unprofessional to take things to that level, to think that it all needs to be done immediately. It doesn't need to be done immediately. It needs to be done carefully. And that means you have to prepare the ground. And no one idea is right. No one idea is that which solves everything. And so I'm more of the opinion that this is, as Lou Elizondo has said, a process that needs to be that just needs to be worked on continuously. And it's like, okay, what went wrong? Let's have a forensics of what went right and what went wrong. Who was most going to be hurt by the kind of disclosure, and can we get intel on that? Not to counter them, but to address their concern. I mean, and that's what this is, that if there are concerns about disclosure, finding out what they might be and how they should be addressed is really what, should be argued in the literature. Not argued on Twitter, but argued in the literature with backed up referencing and good argument and reasoning. And it isn't that the publication of something makes it right. It's just that it allows ideas and thought process to be put in the record so they don't have to be rediscovered. And that's the other reason why publishing this kind of stuff and getting it out there is really important. Because let's say we don't get it done this generation, but maybe the next generation will have it. And so, but then they don't have to rediscover the arguments. I mean, one of the things I've learned in science, and frankly, especially in working on this area in UAPology, is that many of the ideas that I think I've come up with uniquely, I go back into the literature, into the books or the historical records, and I find out that 5 other people that I didn't even know had already had that idea. So it's like, but I shouldn't have to search through somebody's book to find it. It should be referenceable and searchable, through the literature, so that I can credit those people for having the idea first.
That totally makes sense. So now, one thing that we've heard discussed on Twitter is if this was Plan A, let's say, that I think maybe Richard Budd or someone like that referenced something that there is a Plan B. Is there a Plan B? And if so, is it something you can discuss?
I mean, no. I mean, there's no immediate Plan B that I'm aware of. I mean, I think we're still in Plan A. I mean, Plan A is just to keep pushing forward. I mean, there might be an unexpected Plan B, which is somebody from within decides to break their oaths and come out, or release information through some surreptitious means so that they don't get in trouble. And I think that would be a disaster. I'm not advocating for that in any way, shape, or form. But that's the kind of unexpected disclosure that I thought that Carl was quite professionally and appropriately trying to protect against.
Right.
So, I think they've heightened the risk of that occurring by basically blocking the UAP amendment as it stands today. The way that I understand it's being at least whittled down to is that there will only be the internal organs of government which previously were doing things the way they were doing them, but it's just a little bit more formalized. So even if they manage to get that in and passed as a law, it will put UAP on the record in the law as in a way that even Arrow doesn't accomplish right now. So I think small steps are what's going to be important here. So I'm not, again, back to your original point, I'm not disheartened. If anything, I'm motivated. And I hope that your listeners would take that tack as well, because no one ever succeeds if they run away at the first failure. I
couldn't agree more. The reaction that I've seen from folks on Twitter and elsewhere is the level of political activism that I think this will ignite is significant. And I would say that Turner and Rogers and whoever else was lining their pockets are going to have a rude awakening. And speaking of rude awakening, myself and two other people have something that will be coming out in the media very soon that all I can say is the Pentagon is not going to be happy, and they had their chance.
Don't tell me. Don't tell me. I don't want to know.
It's worth the wait. Trust me. It's been in the works for a while, and it's worth the wait. And yeah, so you can't keep this stuff under wraps. So do you think, or have you ever heard, is the Biden administration pro-disclosure? Have you heard any feedback as far as how the executive branch felt about the Schumer amendment? Of course, a lot of us had heard that they were involved in the negotiation. What do you know, or what can you offer up on that?
Well, I can really only repeat what I know publicly that David Grush said recently on the Rogan show, that but that although he hasn't spoken to anybody at the top level in the Biden administration, anybody with half a brain knows that Schumer would not have put something like that forward during a major election year that could be used to bat him about the head with, or the Democrats about the head with. And so it of course went out with tacit approval of the Biden administration. What we do know is that it's very unlikely it's going to be brought up again anytime soon. Because we have an election year coming up. We have all the tumult in the world going on with Israel, Hamas, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, and God knows what other hotspots are about to erupt. And so while I never like the argument, we have better things to do, there's only so many things that can be really paid attention to and put as a top priority in any legislative session. I think this was our chance for this year, but I'm still a young man.
Yes, you are. Right? And speaking of young man, you're quite a celebrity in these circles. And there's this guy who has his Twitter account, Uplifting Tweets, he's clearly a fan. He may be even a bigger fan than Jason Colavito, or however you say his name.
Be careful, Jason. As you know, I've accused of being my secret, admirer. I'm not his. I'll say it again. Jason, no means no.
Yeah.
No means no.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. But I had picked a few of my favorite picks from Uplifting. This I love, man. You're a one handsome James Dean there. I must say.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yeah, that's I love that one. And
10 years old, at least.
now, who is this that you're with?
I would be snapped in two on the football field.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't do sports at all. And I had no idea you're also a very famous rapper. I hear your stage name is Garry G.
Garry G, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Let's see here. Getting your hair cut.
That one's cute. Isn't that another James Dean one?
I think it might. Yeah, actually, I do think it is James Dean. Yep, there's somebody likes James Dean, and if there's anyone that can drop a mic, it is certainly you. That is for sure. We had I would say, some serious mic drop moments during the Soul Conference.
Yeah, it was good.
And disclosure is coming. Yeah, I would say that you're definitely a Paul Revere there, and the disclosure. The disclosure train. That's yeah. That was that one really
doing that. I mean, that's the thing. Who goes through videos to find those moments where you're like caught your face in a something like that? That's pretty good. I like that one.
I agree. There's a little baseball catcher there, man. You are a now. Okay, so here's my question.
That one's very real.
But you're really small. What happened? How did you grow?
Yeah, I know that one's hot.
Yeah,
I'll take that one.
That definitely is. And yep, that was it. But anyway, I thought you would enjoy seeing those uplifting tweets. He does a lot of our graphics work, and he is just amazing. So what I would like to do is open this up to I'm going to quit babbling myself because I tend to do that, and I'm going to throw some questions to you. These have all been sort of our wonderful moderators have really helped kind of call these questions down. I don't think folks will be able to get to all of them. This is, I would say, probably our largest our most viewed live stream that we've ever had. So, okay, so let's see here. Eric, are there plans to incorporate economists in the Soul Foundation in any way?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I mean, the next meeting that we plan to have in Washington, D.C. or Virginia. I mean, the reason is obvious. We want to be able to bring the necessary policy people from the government and government institutions on board. And a lot of the economists that we'd be interested in will be there. We unfortunately did not have anybody at this meeting. There was only so much in 2 days you can talk about. But, you know, I think a thorough review about what, for instance, many of the changes that could be accommodated with new technology is in order. I mean, during my talk at the Soul Foundation, I talked about how the simple question of asking, is there life on Mars for the Viking explorer, actually seeded all of Biotech Valley with 3 key patents: the Cohen-Boyer patent, the patents for what's called flow cytometry from Len Herzenberg, and humanized antibodies all came from the Department of Genetics, where I got my PhD. The latter one was the only one that was filed when I was there, but all from Len Herzenberg's lab and Stan Cohen's lab, and I rotated in Stan's lab when I first came. But it all came from Josh Lederberg, the Nobel Prize winner at the time for basically bacteria having sex. That's what he won the Nobel Prize for. And for basically information transfer between bacteria. And but he was fascinated by the concept. And the engineers that he brought on board to design the instrumentation then was promulgated into the department and ended up, you know, essentially stimulating all of this money. So, I mean, you're talking trillions of dollars from one simple question. Now, success has many parents. Failure is an orphan. So, you know, I'm not saying that it's the only thing that happened there, but economist, thinking in a future forensic sense, with the right training, could look at what would happen, the disruptions that would happen. And again, this is going back to what Carl was trying to do. I mean, one of the people who were supposed to be on that committee was to be an economist, because you wanted to know that you don't release information that's going to completely disrupt the entire economy. I mean, energy being for one, travel being another. I mean, if you totally upset, and it's not that just because you know that a new energy source is possible, or that it's going to show up on Amazon tomorrow, you can order it. It's the knowledge of it will upset markets. And so, again, this is the reason why I think Carl's amendment was genius, and what he wanted to do was because it was preparing for this. Now, maybe somebody already in the government says, well, actually, we already know that. Thank you very much, Gary. We're doing that behind the scenes. We don't need, some outside academics' help. Well, tell me that you're doing it so I can go do something else. That's really my point. So, great question. We need to bring such a person on board. We're growing. Soon enough we'll have a place on the website for donations. And just before I get accused for the 90 millionth time of being a grifter, I'm taking absolutely no salary for my position in the Sol Foundation, much to the chagrin of my husband.
Yeah, copy that. Yeah, these debunkers are so full of it. It's not even worth giving them the. Yeah, giving them the time of day. Okay, and this is actually a question that I at one point was going to ask during the conference. As you were one of the first people I reached out to when stuff started showing up above my house, and nothing had ever happened my entire life. It's happened plenty of times. Last time was close to October, and the only thing I could surmise was it was due to me looking into the phenomenon or mentally engaging it. I mean, I have no fucking idea. Anyway, but here's a very legitimate question from Colin Exchange. How do you feel about a catastrophic disclosure by the NHI? So, in other words, what I have experienced firsthand, for no reason that I can track to, there's no history of it. What is the risk we run of NHI all of a sudden appearing to large swaths of the population and people just going crazy?
Well, I don't think that. It depends on the scale of the event. We've had those kinds of events already. I mean, look at Phoenix, Arizona. Perhaps social media wasn't in place well enough to get that information out fast enough. It was still old-fashioned news. Maybe there will. I don't know what the risk is. I forget who it was who spoke about it. Oh, yes, it was Chris Mellon. I think. His talk was really about, partly about, what happens if there is risk for us acknowledging that they're there, and therefore there would be a response by whatever it is to, I don't know what, keep us on our place,
right.
Drop a large rock on us, and maybe the dinosaurs got a little too inquisitive. I don't know. So I don't know. I don't worry about that. I don't. That's a kind of a hypothetical that, frankly, it would be great. I don't see it as catastrophic. I see it as kind of like they're like, okay, well, if you guys aren't going to figure this out for yourselves, here we are. But I mean, there's people always say, what's the wow signal that I don't know, they just gave SETI $250 million, ridiculous, so that they can listen for faint signals from elsewhere when the signal is right in front of you. I mean, you have to be egregiously ignorant to not see it for what it is. I mean, that's the signal. So there's been that kind of, I mean, maybe that is the catastrophic disclosure, or that's the extent to which they're, I mean, I think you need to turn the whole question around and say, why would they bother? What's the reason? I mean, we think of ourselves as the center of our universe, we're not necessarily the center of anybody else's. And I just think for a long time, and again, David Grush just said exactly the same thing on Rogan. It's, at best they're neutral, I would say, perhaps occasionally intervening, but I don't think that we're the center of anybody else's program. Or if it is, it's a tiny piece of whatever their bigger purpose is, and we'll never understand it or know it.
One of the things that really stuck out to me at Soul was all of the presentations, and these are some of the smartest people on this topic, if not, in the world, I would say. There was no one said if these are real or if we are being interacted with. It was definitive. This is here. This is what is happening. We need to deal with this in an adult fashion.
Right, and that was the whole point of it. It's about being. I had given a presentation now almost 8-9 years ago at Esalen that had been put together by Jeffrey Kripal, and the point of at least what I was talking about was, I said, look, let's start from the assumption that they're real, and if they're real, what are the consequences of that reality? And that's an academic question. That shocked Diana Pasulka, and she wrote about it in her book. That shocked her that anybody would dare make that premise. But that's how scientists start, because I'd already passed the point of no return on that. And so when Peter and I discussed how we should put the whole thing together, it wasn't even a bone of contention. It's like, we're not going to start with, are they real? Because we've been there for the last 100 years. Let's talk about, and this is what a policy and think tank is all about, is to think about the consequences of a speculative outcome. Now, I don't think it's speculative. I think the speculation is really now moved on to the next phase, which is, what are the consequences of the knowledge that there's something here? What are the consequences, at least from my point of view, where I think mostly about things, is about the technology. I can almost care less about the NHIs. I really can't. I mean, it's like, okay, fine, somebody else will deal with that. Right. That's a UN problem. That's not a Garry Nolan problem. Right. Garry Nolan problem is, how does the technology work and how can I exploit it? How can I use it? I mean, I'm just a techno geek at heart. I like to know how things work.
I totally geek out on the technical part as well, although I'd have to say most of it is over my head. Now, you spoke earlier about signals, and I know this is kind of different type of signal, but some CDXX Time asked, I've wondered with Skinwalker Ranch, has Dr. Nolan looked into the 1.6 gigahertz signals or know anything about it? I'd also read somewhere too that our government is able to look at the RF frequencies emitted by these vehicles and be able to predict what they're going to do. What can you say about that?
Well, I've heard several frequency ranges being mentioned, but I think for the same reason that a jet fighter sounds different than a helicopter, the frequencies that any of these things might emit are going to be different. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all to it. But I think, for instance, what Avi Loeb is doing at Harvard and what others are actually doing independently, and some people I've spoken to, some really interesting results. The signals are unique, and it's not just the one signal; it's the sidebands, which are indicative of how a signal is generated. And it's, I think that collecting that kind of information and then correlating it to sightings is really the business of scientists, if we can get our hands on the right kind of instrumentation. Or, what I had hoped, at least in part from this UAP amendment, was that some of that kind of information might get released to the public, or to at least vetted scientists who could be trusted to report back the information in a secure way. Now, again, maybe some of this is already going on, or maybe that's what Sean Kirkpatrick has been doing. And I'm going to remain positive about his intentions and his goals and the strictures that were placed on him. And so, maybe that's what they're already doing. But again, you can always think about it this way. If you see a signal, what does that tell you about the device that generated it? And if the signal is correlated to the movement of the object or the propulsion system of the object, what does that tell you about the propulsion system? Everything I do in science is I'm not looking directly at the proteins. I'm looking at what the protein's effects are on its environment. And I'm usually several steps away from the initiating event of causality. But still, though, with enough data, I'm able to infer how the machine is operating inside of a cell. The same approach is going to be used, I think, to decipher how these objects move. And we can, or we can look, if we know what they are, if we have some of the craft, as alleged by many, you look at the thing and then maybe we can turn one part of it on and it emits that signal. And then we go, this is that.
This is that, right.
Yeah. And so, it's going to be an iterative process. But I also know from having seen some data on some of the materials that, the people who were collecting the data did a good job collecting the data, but they're not putting it together in the way that a scientist would. And it's just sad to me to see this, that it's frankly a crime, of at least scientific intent and scientific ethics to not use the information as it could be best used, especially given, the situation that we find ourselves in today. We're about ready to boil our oceans and, run into all kinds of immigration problems because of climate change. The same people who are complaining about immigration are the ones who are also telling us that the planet's not heating up.
Yeah.
Because the planet heating up is what's driving immigration.
Yeah.
And so it's like, actually, I might be young, but I'm also glad I'm 62 years old.
Yeah. Copy that.
It's going to be somebody else's problem soon enough.
Copy that. Okay, let's see here. So we did that. Sorry. Let's see. This is from Nick M. Will the videos from the Seoul conference be made publicly available?
Of course. Oh yeah, yeah. There was a lot of misinformation or worries about why we didn't want all the videos, tweeted and pictured right in the middle. We just don't want anybody having to deal with somebody, on social media talking about their work incompletely. But no, it's really just being done professionally. And I haven't heard anybody say that they don't want their stuff put out there. It'll all go on YouTube, free, no cost. But we're spending a lot of money to have it done professionally, because look, the Sol Foundation doesn't exist for free. We're going to have to do fundraisers. We're going to have to do presentations. Maybe we'll go into a bit of a documentary. There's a little bit of a 10-minute short being made, but then all of the rest of the talks will be able to be dissected writ large by the community soon enough.
I love that. The presentations were just phenomenal. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
We have literally terabytes of video and camera out there that has been uploaded to the UK, where it's being edited right now.
Fantastic. I know everyone is looking forward to that. Let's see here from Eli. Dr. Nolan, do you expect legacy programs to reach out to your organization for the purpose of recruitment of scientists and other experts?
That would be nice, but I'm not going to say any more.
Copy that. Someone was I think at some point you mentioned, or you said the word nincompoop, and that made someone very, very happy. So I don't know where that was. Okay, this is from Logan I'm going to butcher his name, as I'm prone to do. I'm a chemical engineering student with an interest in material science. What can I do to increase academic involvement on this subject?
Well, I think pay attention to the talk that I gave when it goes out about atomic imaging. I think basically getting people to understand that knowledge of structure at the atomic level is really what it's going to take to understand how these things operate. And there is no such instrument out there. So what you can do is think about ways, look at the tools that are currently available and realize their pros and cons, and see if there's a way to fashion out of what's already available something which is synergistic in capability and therefore a level up in sensitivity or resolution. So I think that getting people to think about how to make something better is really what's necessary, because the tools that are currently available to understand the stuff that I've been alleged exist are insufficient. And I know all the materials analysis approaches. I don't care if people say, oh, well, you're not a metallurgist, Gary. Yeah, but I can read.
Okay, understood. Okay, next question. Let's see here. This is from Max Amp in Peril, I think. Can you give us an update on the recorded event you mentioned in the past relating to a shadow biome? I don't think I know about this.
Yeah, no, there was a guy on Twitter, in a far off country, who had images of things that I couldn't explain, and I did trust him. I spoke with him, and it was really quite intriguing. And I don't want to put the guy under duress, but I had offered to pay for cameras and things, and I did pay for some things for him. But then I don't know what happened, but things just kind of went awry, and so I still think that the images of what he had put up there were real. And they, it seemed to be it was worth investigating. I'll just say it that way. And it seemed to indicate what people have called a shadow biome.
Got it. Okay, this is from
a form of life that you need a special kind of camera to see.
Understood. Okay. This is from Elodie Lizet. In your 2023-2025 research agenda presented on the Soul Foundation website, it is written that you are working on an initial policy framework for the European Union. Can you tell us more about this?
Right. So actually, one of our board members is Jonathan Berta, who unfortunately goes unrecognized a little too often, but he's from Belgium. He's the CEO of an artificial intelligence company called RoboVision, mostly development of medical AI, biomedical AI. And the point is, as is often made, everybody thinks that, or at least everybody accuses the U.S. of being U.S.-centric, which of course they are, and that UFOs only seem to show up around the U.S. Well, no, we just record them more, I guess, or the stigma is a little bit less here to collect the information. And so, his and actually many other individuals basically push is, let's make the European Parliament aware, let's make other governments aware of this and where the U.S. is. And, because of the UAP amendment, whether it passes or not, many other governments have already taken notice, and they said, okay, well, for better or worse, the U.S. government has put its stamp of approval on this matter. That politicians decided to crush it. Well, politicians crush things every day. They're like that. The traffic ticket. School marm type who likes to run over daisies on their way to giving you a traffic ticket.
Right.
They get joy out of that. I mean, that's just their daily bread. So I don't worry about that. But people are paying attention now, and that just further expands. So Jonathan is really driving that initiative. And again, each country is different, and at least with the European Union, we have the opportunity to talk to a unified voice. And frankly, maybe one good thing about Brexit is it got the UK out of that discussion. And I'm British originally; I was born there. And if anything, they were the ones who were perhaps more under U.S. intelligence agencies' yoke on this matter, under their leash, and so now they're out of that. And maybe that's going to enable something a little bit better. Yeah, and of course, Chris Sharp has been really railing publicly about the UK's lack of inquisitiveness. I mean, come on, England. You made your place in the world by wondering what was on the other side of the ocean.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't mean you have to go and exploit it, but let's keep up that acquisitiveness, and maybe at least your commercial empire can build once again.
Yeah, for sure. I know another Brit. His name is Mick West, except he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. I'll listen to you any day of the week. Okay, so somebody had a follow-up question. The shadow biome, or this video that you saw, can you describe what was in those images?
No.
Got it. Okay, moving on. This is a really great question.
To me, clear evidence of life.
Understood. Camila, this is a really good question. How, as teachers, can we prepare kids at school for the revelation of the truth of this?
Well, I think you pitch it, not preach it, as a test question. What would you do if? Right? Or, give me, and this is as a teacher, I would say, okay, here's the premise, here's the assumption, what are the consequences of this, right? How turn the students into policy analysts who are given the premise and asked to say, well, how does this affect economy, or how does it affect religion, or sociology, or transport, or energy? I mean, you could take it in so many different directions. You could say, let's say that they landed tomorrow. So, for instance, about 10 years ago, I don't know why I did this, but I interviewed students. I interview every year the students who want to come to Stanford for graduate school. And usually you ask them boring, frankly to me, boring questions to, explain the lac operon, or, here's a science problem, tell me about it and think about it. I decided just as a lark to ask all of the students who came in my lab, let's say a UFO landed in your backyard and a ramp went down, would you, and there was a light shining on the inside, would you walk up the ramp? Oh my God. I heard back from the professors yesterday in the department saying, everybody was talking about your question and thinks you might be crazy. Well, from that class that year, of the 8 we accepted, 3 came to my lab.
Wow.
Right? So I guess it wasn't that bad of a question. Although they did think I was, some of them were like, this guy's a loon. I've always been a loon. I don't care. But, but it's a provocative question. So ask your students provocative questions. Give them one of the best writers of historical fact besides, say, Jacques, and someone who I would have loved to have had at our meeting is Richard Nolan. I think his books are just full of erudition on this matter, and his work is academically referenceable. I think he's probably one of the few true academic historians on this matter that I at least appreciate.
Right. Well, let's see. We have time for one more question. I know you have to go at the top of the hour here. Does Garry feel that disclosure will come from the government or the phenomenon itself? Is there a sense of urgency to get this out to the public, would you say?
I don't think it's going to come anytime soon from the government any more than what you've already heard. But I mean, what are people looking for? I turn the question around. What are people looking for? Are you waiting for them to tell you that it's okay to? I mean, can you not see what just happened in the last week, and presumably will be finalized tomorrow, and not realize that that's a formal admission of truth? I mean, we were joking at the beginning of the hour. You've got a kid standing on a stool with his hand in the cookie jar, and turning, looking at his mother and saying, "Mommy, I'm not taking these cookies. I'm just counting them." I mean, that's what you just saw happen. I mean, so you really have you have disclosure right there. You just have to read it for what it is. Again, I never have needed anybody's permission to come to the right conclusion. So the NHI have been disclosing themselves to people all over the planet for thousands of years, so they're not going to change their tune, I think. Right. Even absent, I think what Chris Mellon was talking about in his talk. I don't think the government has disclosed as much as it dares at this point. We really have to ask the question. I mean, the question I would be asking me is, why do they think it needs to be secret? I mean, we can all iterate them, but I want to know the principal reasons why the people who do hold the information think that it needs to be kept secret. That's that's the question to me.
I completely agree with that. I think that is people have to sit and ask that question. Also, what would you recommend to our viewers as far as how can they play a constructive role in trying to move this forward with the government?
Well, I mean, get involved, write letters. I mean, it sounds boring. Write letters. Use ChatGPT to generate 100 different letters and send them off and email them, right? Or get the phone calls. I know that there was a website that went around with the telephone numbers. I actually called a few of them myself, and just keep pushing it. But the next time you're at a political rally and you happen to be next to either the person trying to get your vote or one of their staff, and say, well, this really is important to me, in a non-crazy way. What is your stance on this? I think, and the public doesn't, the government never operates without the public's support. And so maybe you'll never be able to talk to a representative, but find the language to talk to your friends or your parents or children about it. But again, use the language of data. Here's the data, not they're RET and they're coming to steal our crops or our water or whatever, or our molten core, according to whatever sci-fi show you like best, and just convince them that there is something worth watching. And so James Fox's movies would be great. The show about the Ariel school, the Ariel phenomena. I mean, just get them to sit down and watch that. I mean, anybody who can think that those children were lying, I just think that those are the things. You can entertain them at the same time as you're convincing them with some of these films.
That's a very great point. I mean, we all know the power of media. Dr. Nolan, we really appreciate your time and moreover your work and your dedication. and just the seriousness and thoughtfulness that you bring to this whole thing. I would say, as the human species, should be very grateful for everything that you've done.